Okay, so today we're taking a deep dive into something pretty special.
Yeah.
We're headed to Franciacorta
Franciacorta.
in Italy,
Mm-hmm.
which, if you don't know, it's a region dedicated entirely to making high-quality sparkling wines.
That's right.
And we've got a lot to cover today. So
We do.
we've got Franciacorta's history and traditions and, how it
Mhm.
came to be.
Yeah, like how'd they get started?
Exactly. And how it
The
evolved.
terroir.
The terroir.
Huge.
Huge.
Yeah. And especially the role of Lake Iseo. We've got a lot on that.
Big-time lake effect.
And then we'll get into like the actual winemaking, what
Yeah.
grapes they use.
Which grapes, how they make it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The metodo Franciacorta.
Yes, the metodo Franciacorta, the different styles and even how to taste it and what to pair it with.
Food pairings, yeah.
Yeah.
We got that.
And then we'll touch on some of the producers that you should know.
Oh, yeah. Big names and some up-and-comers, too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can get a sense of, like, the landscape of Franciacorta winemaking.
The movers and shakers, so to speak.
Exactly.
Love
And even what it's like to visit the region.
Ooh, yeah. The eno-tourism aspect.
Yeah, if you want to go.
Right in my list.
And then, kind of wrap it up with
Yeah.
the challenges and what the future might hold for Franciacorta.
Bodega's picture, yeah.
So that is a lot, but that's what we're here for. This is a deep dive.
Deep dive.
Right. So by the end, we want you to walk away, like, really understanding what makes Franciacorta so special.
Like not just another bubbly. Right.
Yeah. Beyond just Italian sparkling wine.
This is serious stuff.
This is a whole thing.
Yeah.
So to kick things off, I think we should start with, like, the origin story,
Okay.
Where does Franciacorta even come from?
Well, the history of winemaking in the Franciacorta region goes way back.
Okay.
Like to Roman times.
Wow.
Yeah, there's evidence they were growing grapes there even then. And then in the Middle Ages, the monasteries played a big role. They kept the winemaking tradition alive.
Right.
But it wasn't until, like, the 20th century that it really started to become known for sparkling wine.
Like, specifically the kind of sparkling wine it is today.
Right, yeah, the high-quality stuff.
Right.
And that was really driven by a few producers who were like, hey, we can make something truly special here.
Yeah.
Something that can rival champagne.
That seems like a pretty ambitious goal.
Yeah, ambitious for sure, but they had the terroir, they had the passion, and they were willing to put in the work.
So when did it really start to gain, like, official recognition as a top-tier sparkling wine?
Well, a major turning point was in 1995.
Okay.
When Franciacorta achieved DOCG status.
DOCG, so that's Denominazione di Origine Controllata e Garantita.
Exactly.
And for our listeners who maybe aren't familiar,
Yeah.
that's basically like the highest quality designation a wine region can have in Italy.
Right, it's like a guarantee of quality and authenticity.
Yeah, so it's a pretty big deal.
Huge.
Yeah, it sets really strict standards for how the wines are made.
Everything from the grape varieties they can use to the aging requirements.
Right, so it's not just handed out, it means something.
Exactly. It's proof that they're serious about making world-class wines.
So they've got the ambition, they've got the official stamp of approval.
Mm.
But let's talk about what actually makes Franciacorta so unique.
Okay. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, and I think our sources all agree that a big part of that is the terroir.
Absolutely. The terroir is key.
So for anyone listening who's not sure what terroir means.
Right. It's a French word.
It is.
It basically encompasses everything about the environment where the grapes are grown.
Yeah, it's the whole package, the soil, the climate, the topography, like the whole deal.
Yeah. And all of those factors together influence the character of the grapes and ultimately the wine.
And Franciacorta's terroir is pretty unique, right?
Oh, it's very special. So first of all, you have the soil, which is glacial in origin.
Okay, glacial, so that means it was formed by glaciers, right?
Exactly. Thousands of years ago.
Wow.
Glaciers moved through the area and they left behind all these different types of soil.
Okay.
You've got morainic soil, which is kind of rocky and gravelly.
Okay.
You've got alluvial soil, which is deposited by rivers and streams.
Okay.
And you've got calcareous soil, which is rich in calcium carbonate, basically like limestone.
So it's a really diverse mix of soil types.
Yeah, very heterogeneous.
And how does that affect the crepes?
Well, each soil type brings something different to the table.
Okay.
The morainic soil gives the wines a certain minerality,
Yeah.
the kind of earthy, stony quality.
Yeah.
The alluvial soil contributes to a balanced acidity,
Okay.
and the calcareous soil helps with drainage and adds a bit of structure.
So it's like the grapes are getting all these different nutrients and minerals.
Yeah, it's like a complex diet for the vine.
Right. And that translates into more complexity in the wine.
Exactly. The wines are more layered, more nuanced.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating how the soil can impact the final product so much.
And what about the climate?
So Franciacorta has a temperate continental climate,
Okay.
which means it has warm summers and cold winters.
Okay.
But the real game changer here is Lake Iao.
Ah, yes, Lake Erie.
It's a huge lake that sits right in the middle of the Franciacorta region.
Right in the heart of it.
Yeah. And it has this incredible moderating effect on the climate.
Okay.
So it prevents extreme temperatures.
Okay, so like it keeps things from getting too hot in the summer and too cold in the winter.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's really important for the grapes because it allows for a longer growing season.
Longer growing season. Okay.
Yeah, the grapes have more time to ripen slowly and develop those complex flavors.
So it's not just like, boom, they're ripe and then that's it?
No, it's a gradual process.
Okay.
And it's also really beneficial for acidity.
Okay, because acidity is so important for sparkling wine.
Oh, it's essential. It gives it that freshness and vibrancy.
Right, you don't want it to be flat.
No, you want that zing.
You want that zinc.
Yeah, and Lake Iseo also creates these gentle breezes that help to keep the vineyards dry.
Okay, so that's good for preventing disease.
Absolutely. It reduces the risk of fungal infections and rot.
So like the lake is this like magical protector of the vineyards.
It really is. It's a crucial part of what makes Franciacorta's terroir so special.
It's like the guardian angel of Franciacorta.
I like that.
So we've talked about the soil, we've talked about the climate, we've talked about Lake Iseo, but it's not just any grape that can grow in this special place, right?
Oh, no. The DOCG regulations are very specific about the grape varieties that are allowed.
So let's break down these authorized grapes.
Okay, let's do it.
So first up, we've got Chardonnay.
Chardonnay, the king of sparkling wine grapes.
Yeah, it seems to be the go-to for a lot of high-quality sparkling wines around the world.
It's got this amazing ability to produce wines with elegance, structure, and aging potential.
Right, Chardonnay wines can really evolve over time.
Yeah, they can develop these really complex aromas.
So what kind of flavors can you expect from Chardonnay and Franciacorta?
Well, when it's young, you often get these lovely citrus notes like lemon and grapefruit.
Okay, nice and fresh.
Yeah, and also green apple and pear.
Okay.
But as it ages, it starts to develop these richer, more toasty notes like brioche, hazelnut, maybe even a little bit of honey.
Oh, that sounds delicious.
It's really beautiful how it transforms. So Chardonnay really forms the backbone of a lot of Franciacorta wines.
Okay, so that's Chardonnay. What's next?
Then we have Pinot Noir.
Pinot Noir. Okay, so we're bringing in a red grape here.
Yeah, and it adds a lot of depth and complexity to the blend.
Okay.
It brings in red fruit characters like cherry and raspberry.
Okay.
Sometimes a bit of spice.
Okay.
It also contributes to the structure and the body of the wine.
Okay, so it gives it a bit more weight.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Pinot Noir is also essential for the production of Rosé Franciacorta.
Right, because it gives it that lovely pink color. Okay, cool.
So Pinot Noir plays a really important role.
It's a multitasker.
It is.
Okay, and then we have Pinot Blanc.
Pinot Blanc, now this one is a bit more subtle.
Okay.
It adds freshness and some delicate floral aromas.
Okay, so it's like a supporting player.
Yeah, it kind of rounds out the blend.
Okay.
You might get hints of white flowers, citrus, maybe a little bit of almond.
Okay, sounds elegant.
It is. It adds a touch of finesse.
And last but not least, we have Herbamont.
Herbamont. This one is special.
Okay, why is that?
Well, it's an autochthonous grape variety.
Okay, autochthonous, that's a fancy word.
It just means it's native to the Franciacorta region.
Okay, so it's like a local specialty.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it can only make up a maximum of 10% of the blend.
Okay, so it's kind of a little sprinkle of Herbamont,
Yeah, just a touch.
but it must add something special.
Oh, it does. It brings in a unique character.
Okay, what kind of character?
Well, it's a late ripening grape, so it has naturally high acidity.
Okay, so that's good for that caramelizing we were talking about.
Yeah, it adds to that freshness and vibrancy.
Right.
And it also has these interesting herbal notes.
Herbal, like grass or something?
Yeah, maybe a little bit of grass, maybe some chamomile, a little bit of thyme.
Interesting.
It's very subtle,
Okay.
but it adds a certain depth and complexity.
Okay, and it's especially important for a certain style of Franciacorta, right?
Yeah, it's really prized in the Sauternes style, which we'll talk about later
Yeah, I'll
on.
get to that.
Yeah.
So we've got our 4 authorized grapes, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Blanc, and Herbamont.
The Fab Four.
They're all growing in this, like, magical terroir influenced by the soil and the climate and Lake Iseo.
Mm-hmm.
But how do they actually turn those grapes into the delicious sparkling wine we know as Franciacorta?
Now we're getting to the heart of it, the Méthode Franciacorta.
Okay, so What makes this method so special?
Well, it's based on the traditional method, which is the same method used to make champagne.
Okay, so this is like the gold standard for sparkling wine production.
It's the most labor-intensive, time-consuming, but also the way to produce the highest quality sparkling wine.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Walk me through it.
So it all starts with the harvest.
Okay.
And in Franciacorta, the grapes are harvested by hand.
Okay, so someone's actually going out there and picking each bunch of grapes.
Yeah, they're carefully selecting only the ripest, healthiest grapes.
Okay, so that's already a lot of work.
It is, but it's worth it for the quality.
Makes sense.
Then the grapes are gently pressed to extract the juice,
Yeah.
and that juice undergoes a first fermentation.
Okay, so that's where the yeast converts the sugar into alcohol.
Exactly.
Right.
And sometimes this first fermentation takes place in oak barrels.
Okay, so that's interesting. Not all sparkling wines use oak.
No, it's a stylistic choice.
Okay.
And it can add complexity and a bit of a creamy texture to the wine.
Okay, so it's like adding another layer of flavor.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got our fermented juice. What happens next?
Well, now it's time to create the blend.
The blend, okay.
Yeah. So the winemaker will take the different base wines from different grape varieties, different vineyards, maybe even different vintages,
Okay.
and they'll carefully blend them together to create the specific style of Franciacorta they're aiming for.
So it's like an art form, like a painter mixing their colors.
It really is. It takes a lot of skill and experience.
Okay, and then this is where things get really interesting.
This
now.
is where the magic happens.
The second fermentation.
Yeah, so now we've got our still base wine blend.
Okay.
And we're going to add a mixture called the liqueur de tirage.
Liqueur de tirage, what's in that?
It's basically a mix of sugar, yeast, and sometimes a little bit of wine.
Okay, and why do they add that?
Well, the sugar is food for the yeast,
Okay.
and the yeast is going to eat that sugar and produce carbon dioxide gas.
Ah, and that's what creates the bubbles.
Exactly. The bubbles are trapped inside the bottle, and that's what gives Franciacorta its sparkle.
Okay, so they add the liqueur de tirage, and then what?
Then the bottles are sealed with a crown cap, just like a beer bottle.
Okay. And they're laid down horizontally in a cool, dark cellar. Okay. And that's where the second fermentation takes place. Okay. And this is a crucial part of the Metoda Franciacorta because the wine is going to spend a long time aging on its lees.
Okay, lees, remind me what that is again.
The lees are the spent yeast cells that settle to the bottom of the bottle after fermentation.
Okay.
And as the wine ages in contact with the lees, it develops all sorts of complex flavors and aromas.
Okay, like what?
Well, you get those classic bread dough aromas like brioche and toast.
Okay.
Sometimes a bit of nutty, like hazelnut or almond.
Okay.
And it also contributes to the texture of the wine, making it creamy and smooth.
Okay, so it's like a whole other level of complexity that you wouldn't get if you didn't age it on the lees.
Exactly.
And how long does it have to age on the lees?
Well, the minimum aging period for non-vintage Franciacorta is 18 months.
18 months, so that's a year and a half.
Yeah, and for certain styles like Satin, Rosé, Melissimoto, and Reserva, the aging requirements are even longer. So they're really committed to this process.
Absolutely. It's a key part of what makes Franciacorta so special.
Okay, so the wine has been aging on its lees for however long, but it's still got all those yeast cells floating around in it, right?
Yeah, it's not exactly ready to drink yet.
So how do they get rid of those?
Well, that's where riddling comes in.
Riddling, okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool process.
Okay.
So the bottles are placed in these special racks called pupeters,
Okay.
and they're gradually tilted and rotated over a period of weeks.
Okay.
And this causes the lees to slowly slide down the neck of the bottle.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, it concentrates all the sediment right at the top.
Okay.
And then comes disgorgement.
Disgorgement.
Yeah, so now the neck of the bottle is frozen
Okay.
and the crown cap is removed.
Yeah.
And the pressure inside the bottle forces out that frozen plug of lees.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a little bit dramatic. And
Yeah.
now you've got a clear, sparkling wine.
Okay, but it's not quite ready to go yet, right?
No, one more step.
Okay.
The dosage.
Ah, yes, the dosage.
So a small amount of liqueur d'expédition is added to the bottle.
Liqueur d'expédition. And what's that?
It's basically a mixture of wine and sugar.
Okay.
And the amount of sugar determines the sweetness level of the final Franciacorta.
Okay, so this is where they decide if it's going to be dry or sweet.
Exactly.
Okay, and then finally they put the cork in and it's ready to go.
Yep, that's it. The Metoda Franciacorta in a nutshell.
Wow. That is a lot of work.
It is, but it results in some truly exceptional wines.
I can't wait to try some. But first, I think we need to talk about the different styles of Franciacorta.
Yeah, because it's not just one type of wine. There's a whole spectrum.
So let's break it down, starting with the driest style.
Okay, the driest is pas dosé, which literally means no dosage.
Okay, so there's no added sugar.
Exactly. It's the purest expression of the terroir.
Okay, what kind of flavors can you expect from a Pas Dosé Franciacorta?
Well, you'll get a lot of minerality, that kind of earthy, stony character, and then really vibrant acidity.
Okay, so it's going to be super crisp and refreshing.
Yeah. And then the fruit flavors tend to be more on the citrus side, like lemon, grapefruit,
Okay.
maybe a little bit of green apple.
Okay.
And often you get a really distinctive saline finish.
Saline, like salty.
Yeah, like a hint of sea salt.
Well, that's interesting. So it's a really unique style.
It is. It's for people who really want to experience the terroir without any sweetness masking it.
Okay, so if Pas Dosé is at one end of the spectrum, what's next?
Well, next up is Extra Brut.
Extra brewed.
And this still has very little sugar added, but a touch more than Pas Dosé.
Okay, so it's still very dry.
Yeah, bone dry.
Okay.
But you start to get a little bit more fruit character coming through.
Okay, like what kind of fruit?
Well, you might get some white peach, maybe some pear, a little bit of floral notes.
Okay.
But it still has that really crisp acidity and a nice minerality.
Okay, so it's a step up in terms of fruitiness, but still very dry.
Exactly.
Okay, and then what?
Then we have Brut, which is kind of like the classic style.
Okay.
It's the most common style of Franciacorta,
Okay.
and it has a bit more sugar added than Extra Brut.
Okay, so it's a little bit softer.
Yeah, it's still dry, but it's a little more rounded.
Okay.
You get more ripe fruit flavors like apple, pear, maybe even some tropical fruit.
Okay.
And those yeasty, toasty notes from the lees aging are more pronounced.
I guess it's a bit more complex.
Yeah, it's a really well-balanced style.
Okay, so that's Pas Dosé, Extra Brut, and Brut.
The dry side of the spectrum.
And now we're moving into the sweeter styles.
Okay, so next up is Extra Dry.
Extra dry. Okay, now this is where things get a little confusing for me because it sounds like it should be drier than Brut.
I know, the naming conventions can be a bit counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But Extra Dry is actually slightly sweeter than Brut.
Okay, so it's still relatively dry, but with a noticeable touch of sweetness.
Yeah, you'll definitely get more pronounced fruit flavors.
Okay.
Like ripe pear, white peach, maybe even a little bit of honeydew melon. And it has a softer acidity, so it's a little more approachable.
Okay, so like a good gateway Franciacorta for people who aren't sure if they like dry, sparkling wine.
Yeah, it's a good starting point.
Okay, and then what's next?
Then we have Seccout, or Secco, which is moderately sweet.
Okay, so we're getting into dessert wine territory here.
Not quite dessert wine, but it's definitely on the sweeter side.
Okay.
You'll get more pronounced fruit flavors again, maybe even some candied fruit notes.
All right.
And the acidity is still there, but it's balanced by the sweetness.
Okay.
It's a really nice style to pair with certain desserts.
Okay, and finally, we have the sweetest style, demi-sec.
Demi-sec. This is definitely a dessert wine.
Okay.
It has a pretty significant amount of sugar added.
Okay, so what kind of flavors can you expect?
Well, you'll get a lot of ripe fruit, like stewed peaches, apricots, maybe even some dried fruit notes.
Okay.
And then you'll get those honey and caramel notes from the dosage.
Okay, so it's a really rich, luscious style.
Yeah, it's like a dessert in a glass.
Okay, so we've covered the different sweetness levels, but there are also a couple of other categories of Franciacorta that we need to talk about.
Right, there's satin and rosé.
Okay, so let's start with satin. What makes this one unique?
Well, satin is always a blanc de blanc.
Blanc de Blanc, meaning it's made exclusively from white grapes.
Exactly. So typically Chardonnay and Pinot Blanc.
Okay.
And the key thing about satin is that it's bottled with a lower pressure.
Okay, lower pressure. How does that affect the wine?
Well, it gives it a really fine, delicate mousse.
Mousse, meaning the bubbles.
Yeah, the bubbles are smaller and more persistent.
Okay, so it's like a silkier texture.
Exactly. It's very elegant and refined.
Okay, and what about the flavor profile?
Well, you typically get a lot of white fruit, like pear, white peach, maybe some citrus,
Okay.
and often some floral notes like acacia or honeysuckle.
Okay.
And it has this lovely creamy texture on the palate.
Okay, so it's a very sophisticated style.
It is. It's perfect for special occasions.
And then we have Rosé Franciacorta.
Rosé, yeah. So this is made by adding a bit of Pinot Noir to the blend.
Okay, so that's what gives it that lovely pink color.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the Pinot Noir also contributes to the aroma and flavor profile.
Okay, like what?
Well, you'll get a lot of red fruit, like strawberry, raspberry, sometimes a bit of cherry, and it often has a bit more spice and complexity than a Blanc de Blanc.
Okay, so it's a bit more robust.
Yeah, it can stand up to a wider range of foods.
Okay, and I believe there are also two special categories of Franciacorta, Millesimato, and Reserva.
Yes, these are kind of like the top tiers of Franciacorta.
Okay, so what makes them so special?
Well, Millesimato is a vintage Franciacorta.
Okay, vintage meaning it's made with grapes from a single year.
Exactly, and it has to be an exceptional year.
Okay.
And it has to age on the lees for at least 30 months.
Oh, that's a long time.
It is, but it gives the wine a lot of depth and complexity.
Okay, so what kind of flavors can you expect from a Millesimato?
Well, it depends on the vintage. But typically you'll get more concentrated fruit flavors, maybe some dried fruit notes.
Okay.
And those yeasty, toasty notes from the lees aging will be more pronounced.
Okay, so it's like a more intense version of a regular Franciacorta.
Exactly.
Okay, and then what about Reserva?
Reserva is even more special.
Okay, how so?
Well, it's also a vintage Franciacorta,
Okay.
but it has to age on the lees for at least 60 months.
60 months? That's 5 years?
Yep, it's a serious commitment.
Wow.
And it's only made in the best vintages.
Okay, so it's like the cream of the crop.
Exactly.
Okay, and what kind of flavors can you expect from a Reserva?
Well, it's going to be super complex.
Okay.
You'll get all those classic Franciacorta flavors, but they'll be amplified.
Okay.
More concentrated fruit, more toasty notes, more nutty, maybe even some spicy or earthy notes.
Okay.
And the bubbles will be incredibly fine and persistent.
Okay, so it's like a truly exceptional wine.
It is. It's a real treat.
Okay, so we've covered the entire spectrum of Franciacorta styles, from bone dry to sweet, from simple to complex.
We've done it.
But for our listeners who might be thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but how do I actually taste this stuff?
Ah, yes, the art of tasting.
Yeah, we have some great insights from our sommelier source on this.
Okay, let's tap into their expertise.
So first of all, serving temperature is important.
I know, absolutely. You want to serve Franciacorta chilled, but not too cold.
Okay, so what's the ideal temperature range?
Well, generally between 6 and 10 degrees Celsius.
Okay, so that's like, what, 43 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Oh, okay.
And for more complex wines like the Millesimato and Reserva, you might want to serve them a little bit warmer, closer to 10 degrees Celsius.
Okay, so they can open up a bit more.
Exactly. You want to give those aromas a chance to shine.
Okay, and what about glassware?
So the sommelier really emphasizes the importance of using the right glass.
Okay, what's the right glass for Franciacorta?
A tulip-shaped glass is ideal.
Okay, why is that?
Well, the shape of the glass helps to concentrate the aroma,
Okay.
and it also allows the bubbles to develop properly.
Okay, so you're not losing any of those precious bubbles.
Exactly. You want to savor every sip.
Okay, so avoid those wide, shallow champagne coupes.
Yeah, those are really just for show. They don't do the wine any favors.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, so tulip-shaped glass, chilled but not too cold. Now we're ready to taste.
Okay, talk me through the tasting process.
So the sommelier recommends a systematic approach.
Okay, I like a system.
First, you want to look at the wine.
Okay, what are we looking for?
Well, first of all, the color.
Okay, what should the color Franciacorta be?
Well, it depends on the style.
Okay.
Blanc de Blanc will be pale straw yellow.
Okay.
Rosé will have a pink hue, obviously.
White.
And then the intensity of the color can also tell you something about the age of the wine.
Okay, like older wines might be a bit darker.
Yeah, they might have a bit more golden color.
Okay.
And then you want to look at the perlage.
The perlage, that's the bubbles, right?
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
So you want to see if the bubbles are fine and persistent,
Okay.
or if they're big and dissipate quickly.